Are people born buddy? Or do they have buddiness thrust upon them? Hello! Welcome to my channel. It's been a minute. Today I'm going to be talking about Buddie. Now, what is Buddie, you may ask? That's a good question. Buddie is the ship name for the characters Evan Buck Buckley and Edmundo Eddie Diaz on the show 911. Now, what is 911? 911 is what you call when there's an emergency. No, I'm just kidding. 911 is a procedural drama formerly on Fox, but now it's on ABC. It follows the lives of first responders in Los Angeles. There are 2 spin-offs in Texas and now in Nashville, but the OG original 911 is based in Los Angeles. It follows cops, firefighters, and 911 dispatchers. Now, Buck and Eddie are firefighters at the station 118, along with Henrietta Wilson, Chimney Han, and Ravi Kapanikar, and their late and great captain, Bobby Nash. Now, when I was thinking of doing this video, I was like, who might come across it? Who might watch it? And I've narrowed it down to 4 groups of people. 1, people who watch the show and are buddies also, and will hopefully see where I'm coming from and agree with me. 2, people who watch the show and have no idea Buck and Eddie are even being shipped, because that's a thing. Some people don't know because they're normal. Number 3, people who haven't watched the show but like know of Buddie, like they've seen Buddie around and they're like, what do they have going on? And number 4, people who have never watched the show, haven't heard of Buddie, but might come across this and then might watch the show for Buddie. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I just wanted to make a video talking about Buddie and why I ship them and why I love them and why I think they should be together. I know it sounds crazy. It's fictional. I know it's not real. It's just a ship. It's not real. I know that. But I just really love I just really get into like the media that like I consume and watch and read and all that stuff, and so I get really passionate about it sometimes. Buddie is one of them. I have never gone this fucking crazy about a ship before until Buddie. They're just so insane. They just drive me insane, and I'm like, it's just crazy. And you'll understand, like, if you know, you know, and if you don't, like, you would know, because it's just crazy. I just really love them a lot, and I love the show, and yeah, so I wanted to like make a video just talking about them. So my Buddie origin story starts when I would see people on Twitter talking about the show and talking about Buddie. So I just kind of saw it. I didn't really dive into it at the time or anything, but I did have mutuals who watched it, so I kind of saw it from afar. Then in season 7, which we will get to, but this is important for my origin story, in season 7, Buck comes out as queer, like canonically queer. He kisses a man, and he was canonically queer in the show. And I thought that was all over the timeline on Twitter. Like, it was crazy. I was just like, that is just so amazing for a kid. I knew that people had headcanoned him as bi, and so for them to actually like go through with it and actually make him canonically queer, I was like, that is amazing. So then the next episode after that, I kept seeing like the little sneak peeks that like they would post on social media before the episode, and I was watching those even though I had no idea who these people were, what was going on. But I was watching them and I was just very like endeared by Buck. And so after that, they had a 3-week hiatus before the show came back, so I took that as a challenge and I was like, I'm gonna watch this whole show in 3 weeks, and I did. So there was that. So yeah, that's how it began. I started the show. I was going into it very mindful, very demure, because I know people who ship MLM ships can get very passionate, very intense sometimes, canon or not. So I wanted to go into this and be like, not that I didn't believe what people were saying about Buddie, that they were like a good ship, but I just wanted to see it for myself. I just wanted to like come to my own conclusion about Buddie and see what all the hype was about. And by the end of their first episode together, I saw the Buddie vision. I understood. So yeah, but still, I'm very much like against people being like rude to like actresses of like the female love interest for like ships, because they get in the way of the ship. Like, I'm so against that. No matter how much I love a ship or not, like, no, I'm not about that. So I was also just being cautious of that. I wasn't here for like majority of like their previous relationships. Obviously, I came in during season 7, so I didn't really see much, but still, I'm just like not about that. But yeah, I mean, I did understand why people ship them, and I do love them, and I do want them to be together on the show. And yeah, so here is why. So I want to talk about Buck and Eddie as individuals really quick, before we get into the buddy of it all. So Buck in season 1 is like a player. He like is sleeping with women. He's stealing the fire truck to sleep with women. He gets fired for doing that. He calls himself a self-diagnosed sex addict because he's just so lonely that he just was hooking up with women. But then he meets this woman named Abby who was a dispatcher, and they meet from a call. She gets his number from the call, and he is like I said, he's not wanting to be a player. He's trying to change. So they don't meet up with each other right away. They just talk on the phone, and then eventually they do meet, and then they have this relationship, and he does call it the most transformative relationship of his life. At the end of season 1, Abby's mother passes away. She had Alzheimer's, so she passes away, and Abby is dealing with everything, and she realizes, she was like, I'm gonna travel and do all these things that my mom didn't get to do and that I didn't get to do because I was taking care of my mom. So she decides to like leave for Europe and go travel around Europe, and Buck is under the impression that she's gonna come back and that they're still together, they're still in a relationship. But she leaves and Buck is just left there. So that's kind of where he's at. He comes into season 2. He calls himself Buck 2.0 because he's not going to do that anymore entirely. So yeah, that's Buck. I just think he just doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't want to come to terms with the fact that she is gone and she's probably not coming back. And she doesn't, spoiler alert. Sort of. But I think he's just so lonely that he doesn't even want to accept that right away. So he just continues to live his life. He stays at her apartment while she's gone. So it's this whole thing of him not wanting to let go of that because he's so lonely. So yeah, that's Buck. So Eddie doesn't even come into the show until season 2, as does Buck's sister Maddie, who is very important to the story and to Buck as well. But yeah, Eddie comes into season 2. He used to be in the army. He has a silver star. He has a son named Christopher, who is 7 years old at the time that they come into the show in season 2. Christopher has cerebral palsy, which is something that Eddie and Christopher tried to navigate together. Eddie's wife Shannon left both him and Christopher to be with her mom because her mom had cancer, so she leaves them, and so Eddie doesn't know what to do. Eddie's parents were telling him to give Christopher to them, but he didn't want to do that, so he kind of just starts over as a firefighter in Los Angeles. So him and Christopher moved to LA, and his grandma and his aunt live in LA, so it's not like they're entirely alone. They have that, and now he's joining the 118, and so he is now going to have this found family too, that we'll see. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's Buck and Eddie when they meet. Very important. So now let's get into the buddy of it all. So season 2, episode 1, specifically episode 1 through 4 of season 2, I call Buddy Begins, because in the show they have these Begins episodes, which is when the characters decided to be a firefighter or a first responder. And so I call it Buddy Begins because this is when Buddy begins. This is when they meet. This is when they lay the foundation for their relationship to grow in their partnership at work and outside of work. And so I just love these first few episodes with them to see how they start and how they grow from there. Okay, so episode 1, it starts with Buck coming into the firehouse. He meets up with Hen, Chimney, and Bobby, and he is telling them that he's Buck 2.0. He's not going to be like he was before. So he calls himself Buck 2.0. They're talking about this firefighter calendar thing, the firefighter calendar. And Buck's like, yeah, I'm going to get it. And then they're like, that man is beautiful. And Hen is like, where's the lie? And I like girls because Hen is lesbian, which is beautiful. So enter Eddie Diaz. The camera turns and it shows Eddie Diaz like getting dressed. Well, What a Man by Salt and Peppa plays. Yeah. So iconic, such an amazing character introduction. Truly. So then Buck is like, who the hell is that? Bobby is like, that's Eddie Diaz, new recruit. And Buck is like, what do we need him for? Oh, you'll see. what you need him for. So yeah, Bobby's just telling them like he was in the army, he's an army medic, he has a silver star, and all this stuff. So there is that. That is how Buck gets introduced to Eddie. We don't actually technically see them meet, like, this is Buck, this is Eddie. We don't really see that, but that is what we do get, which I think is so funny and so great. So Buck is like strangely like weird towards Eddie when they go on their first like calls together. Eddie's like trying to help them and be like, you know, this would be a better way to do it, and Buck is like so like just weird and weirdly tense about it. Then they're at like the station gym and Buck is weird again, and Eddie's like, what is your problem? But Eddie's just telling him like, you don't have to be intimidated by me, like we're on the same team. In more ways than one. No, we're on the same team. We're supposed to work together. So then they go on another call and there is like a bomb in this person's leg, and they obviously have to get it out before, and the guy's like losing a lot of blood, so like they need to hurry up. So Buck says that he will do it. He will go with Eddie and do it. And Bobby's like, are you sure? You don't have to. And Buck says, you wanted us to bond, we might end up real close. Well, yes, you will. So they do that. They take the bomb out of this guy's leg. It is just like the beginning of them working together, like I said. So after that, Eddie tells Buck, you can have my back any day. And Buck says, or you know, you can have mine. And that is where I started seeing the buddy vision. I was like, okay, I see I see where we're going. And I was just so excited to dive into everything else with these two. So yeah. So then the next episode is their like big emergency episode, which is an earthquake. The 118 are called to this hotel that like was hit by the earthquake, so they have to go help the people. On the way there, Eddie is like frantically on his phone and Buck is like, are you okay? Eddie's like, there's no service. And Buck is like, who are you trying to reach? And to me, I don't know if this has been talked about, but to me that was like Buck trying to see if Eddie has like a girlfriend or a wife, like, which he does, but he was trying to get in touch with Christopher. So this is where Buck and the rest of the 118 learned that Eddie has a son, and Buck is just like, oh, I love kids. And then Eddie's like, yeah, well, I love this one, I'm always got, the mother's not in the picture. And Buck took that personally. Buck is like, I will be the mother that stepped up. And he just assures Eddie that like, since Christopher's at school, like, I'm sure that he's okay. So cute. And they get to the hotel and Buck and Eddie are teamed up together, and this is just the start of Buck and Eddie teaming up and being partners at work. And so they team up and they go to the hotel and everything. By the end of that, the service comes back. Buck is the first person to tell Eddie that the service is back, and then Buck takes Eddie to pick up Christopher from the school because they were working. So he takes them to pick him up, and this is the beginning of the Buckley Diaz family. We will see how much Buck comes to love Christopher and vice versa, and it's just so beautiful to see. As we will learn, everything is about Buddy except for Buddy, which is about Christopher. And whoever came up with that, kudos to you. I don't remember who said that, but you ate that. Like, it is so true. So episode 4 is called, season 2 episode 4 is called Stuck. It's one of my favorite episodes of the whole show. It's so underrated in my opinion. So it starts with they get called to like this bar or something. So these women on the call are flirting with Buck and Eddie, and Buck is still under the impression that he's in a relationship with Abby. So he's like, oh, I'm off the market. And Eddie is like, oh, I have a son. And Buck is like taken back by that, and he's like, is that really why you're like not talking to these girls? Or is this the reason why you're not dating? And Eddie says that, and they weren't my type. Oh, I'm sure. So they are walking together and they bump into each other, and I guess that's where like Buddy kind of started for like people back then, which is so funny, which makes sense. It's such a funny little scene. But then Eddie gets a call and he goes to the hospital because he had left Christopher with his abuela and she fell down, and so they're at the hospital, and Buck takes Eddie to the hospital. Like, Buck goes with Eddie anyway. He meets Eddie's Tia Peppa, and yeah, she clocks it right away. She's like, who is this? Basically, Eddie was having trouble finding like a caregiver to take care of Christopher when he had work. So he was having trouble. He was leaving Christopher with his abuela and with his aunt. They're like, you just can't keep doing this, because like his abuela's like old, his tia was working, and so like it was just really hard. So he's having trouble finding someone to help take care of Christopher. So Eddie takes Christopher to the fire station because he didn't know where else to take him. And Bobby comes in and he's like, oh, like, who is this? I didn't ask for new recruits, like, just joking. And Eddie's like, oh, I didn't know where else to take him. And Bobby says, it's okay, you took him here. Yeah, you did, you took him here. And he's like, Buck gave me the heads up. Like, Buck gives Bobby the heads up that Eddie needs help taking care of Christopher. Ugh. So Christopher just kind of spends the day at the fire station, which you probably can't actually do, but it's so cute. So yeah, they do that. So Buck is talking to Maddie about Christopher and Eddie and how Eddie needs help with Christopher. And Maddie says, does this boy crush on Eddie mean you're finally getting over Abby? So she kind of sees that, like, what is going on here, and I love it. Then at the end of the episode, Buck introduces Eddie to Carla, who is a home healthcare worker, and that way she can help Eddie kind of figure out how to take care of Christopher, and she can help him. And so he does that for them. Like, he loves them so much, I'm telling you. Buck loves them so much. He helps them, and I'm like, this is where it starts. Like, this is season 2. They just met each other. They barely know each other, and Buck is like doing this to help out Eddie and Christopher. Like, it's beautiful. So I'm gonna jump to this season 2 Christmas episode, which is episode 10. Shannon has now come back into Eddie's life, and he is like, he doesn't know how to tell Christopher because he still hasn't told Christopher that she's like back. So he's trying to figure out how to do that, and he's talking to Eddie and he's talking to Buck, and they're at like the mall. I think they're at like the Grove, but they take Christopher to see Santa. And, you know, they're talking, and then Christopher's done, and he walks over with one of the elves. Her name's Blair. She's an icon. And he takes Christopher, and then Blair, the Christmas elf, says to Buck, who is, like, standing there, you two have an adorable son. What? I was so gagged when I saw that. I was like, what do you mean? Like, people are, like, mistaking them for being husbands and having a son together? And they just met. And Buck doesn't deny it. Buck isn't like, oh, no. He says, thank you. Like, okay. So then the season 2 finale, there is a bomb in the fire truck, and Buck gets stuck under it. You know, everyone's helping him out. Eddie is there holding his hand while everyone else is like pushing the fire truck off of him. So yeah, Buck deals with that. Eddie has his firefighter like promotional ceremony. I don't know what it's called, but he's graduating from like being a probie to now being an actual firefighter. And Buck is like, I have to go. Like, this is very important. I have to go. Well, yes. So yeah, I think it just shows how important Eddie has become to him, and so much so that he is like wanting to go even though he's like hurt and injured. And then that's kind of where season 2 ends. Okay, so season 3 starts. Buck is trying to get back into being a firefighter. He passed his test, but then he had a blood clot. I forgot what it was exactly, but it was like some type of blood clot that was like stopping him from going back. So he is no longer able to go back when he wanted to. He's very sad about it because he loves being a firefighter. So everyone's trying to cheer him up. And so to cheer him up, Eddie brings Christopher to his house and is like, watch him while I go to work. Thank you. So Buck takes Christopher to the Santa Monica Pier, and lo and behold, there's a tsunami and they get caught in it and they almost die. It's crazy. Buck ends up losing Christopher because this is whole thing. But he loses Christopher, but he does not stop looking for him. And eventually he comes to this like station setup, and the 118 are there. Eddie is there, and he sees Eddie and he's like, I'm so sorry, Eddie. Like, he can't even get the words out of his mouth. But Eddie is like, okay. But then Chris is actually found, and this woman has been like carrying him for this whole time that he went missing, and she tells, well, Eddie goes over to him and she's like, you're Buck? And he's like, no, I'm his father, Eddie. And she says he was looking for Buck. So, you know, they were both looking for each other, obviously, because they went through this natural disaster together, and neither of them gave up trying to find each other. And like, that is just so family. So then, like, the next day after the tsunami and everything, Eddie brings Christopher back to Buck, and Buck is like, you want me to watch him after what just happened? And Eddie's like, a natural disaster happened. Like, you didn't give up on him. I've let him down so many times. I'm his dad, but you didn't give up on him. And he says, there's nobody in this world I trust with my son more than you. Oh, like, that is just so beautiful. But I mean, it just shows that Eddie trusts Buck with his son. Obviously, he just said. And I think Buck kind of realizes that too. Buck is still not approved to like go back to work, so he ends up suing the department. And in that lawsuit, he cannot talk to anyone at the 118, including like Eddie and Chris and like their families and everything. So he can't talk to Eddie, can't talk to Christopher. Eddie is going through some shit because, oh, by the way, Shannon died in season 2, forgot to mention. But Shannon dies at the end of season 2, and Eddie's like dealing with his grief and dealing with that, and he goes to like this fight club, and he has like a little bit of road rage one day in a parking lot, and he like punches a guy, and then he goes to jail, and he can't call Buck to bail him out of jail. One day the 118 and Buck are at the grocery store, and they Buck kind of confronts them, not really, but like he just misses them, so that's why he was there. And so he's like talking to them, and Eddie's like, what are you doing? Like, we all have things going on, and we can't even talk to you. You can talk to Christopher. And it just really like puts in perspective like what Buck was doing by doing this lawsuit. So then it's like the Halloween episode. Buck and Eddie are still like and so Buck is trying to talk to Eddie, and Eddie's like, did you ever stop for a minute and think about what this could do to us? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Buck is just really sad and mad at himself for not being there for Eddie and Christopher. And then they make up. Buddie divorce #1, but they make up, and I think they just realize how important they are to each other, and that when they couldn't be that, it was just really hard for both of them. So again, Eddie's like still dealing with his grief. He buys like a truck. I don't know. But one day Eddie and Christopher are at Buck's apartment, and like Buck and Eddie are talking, and he's again apologizing for the lawsuit and for not being there for Eddie and Christopher. We're talking about the truck, and Buck is like, basically he says, do you want to go for the title? And it's just the most charged scene so far between them. I was just like, I see people talking about that, and I'm like, when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, okay. So then the Christmas episode for season 3, Christopher's upset that Eddie has to work on Christmas. He asks Buck if he can spend Christmas with him, and Buck also has to work, and Christopher's just really upset that he can't be with his dad, or like just with his family. So Buck helps organize a little Christmas at the fire station, and so everyone's families come together, and it's just so cute, and it's just like, that is a family. Buck, Eddie, and Christopher are a family. Like, tell me I'm wrong. You can't, because just look. So then in another episode, Christopher tries to skateboard, but he has trouble due to his cerebral palsy, and he falls and gets hurt. He gets really mad at Eddie because Eddie tells him that like he can do anything, and he is like, no, you lied. And so he's really struggling with that, and Buck helps Eddie to build like a makeshift skateboard so that Christopher can actually go on it and can actually ride it, and it's just so beautiful. Okay, so now in the Eddie Begins episode, which is when Eddie decides to become a firefighter, like I was saying, he gets trapped underneath a well that collapses during like a thunderstorm. Buck goes crazy. Buck goes literally like insane. He is like trying to dig in the mud, in the rain. He's trying to dig Eddie out. To see Buck react that way, like, it was just really crazy. But then Eddie does eventually obviously get out of the well, but like Eddie Begins was just such a dire episode to see how Buck reacts when Eddie is in danger and Eddie is in trouble. That was just amazing. So then in the season 3 finale, there's a big train derailment that happens, and they are called there. Abby so happens to be on the train with her fiance, so they're helping Abby's fiance, who's trapped. He's like pinned against something, and they're trying to help him, and yeah, But it was just funny to see Abby and Eddie meet, and then Buck and Abby reuniting, and then they kind of, after the train thing, they reunite just for like one last goodbye. But yeah, that is the end of season 3. Okay, so season 4 has the first buddy scene that I ever saw. It is in episode 3. In this episode, there's like this smart house thing that they get called to. Eddie is like so against technology and everything, and so much so that Buck and Christopher are playing video games at Eddie's house, and he like turns it off and he unplugs it, and he's like, we are gonna go old school, like we are not gonna do electronics anymore. And Christopher asks Buck if they can go to his house to play video games, and Eddie looks at him like, and Buck is like, no, I think we're just gonna go old school for a little bit. And yeah, that was the first buddy scene I ever saw. I saw it on Twitter. The caption was basically like, watch this scene and tell me it's not two dads parenting their son. And so I had watched it at the time that it was posted and that it came out, and I was like, you know what, yeah, it is. And then I actually watched it in the show, and I'm like, yeah, same thing. So then the show has a crossover with 911 Lone Star at the time. Buck gets jealous that Eddie is going off with the other firefighters instead of like staying and working with what he was working with. One of the other firefighters from the other show, named TK, thinks that Buck is flirting with him at the end of when they're about to leave. So I think that was just funny to show that like even before Buck had come out, like there was clear tell signs of that he was queer. Okay, so the last 2 episodes of season 4, they go on this call. It actually isn't even their call. So there was this kid who was sick, but then they find out that his mom was just making him sick and was just faking it. So they go back to help him. And so he gets taken to the hospital and he's okay. But then they're outside and Eddie gets shot by a sniper. It is so crazy. It's one of the craziest like scenes in the show. Buck is standing right in front of him as he gets shot, and it's just like beautiful. It's this beautiful scene of like, well, shot of both of them just like standing there. It's just so, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah. Eddie falls to the ground and Buck is physically like, he had to be physically pushed to the ground by another firefighter because he just couldn't move. But then he sees Eddie on the ground and he goes and pulls him from underneath the fire truck, which, might I add, just 2 years ago he was stuck under a fire truck, but he goes under it to pull Eddie. They get him on the fire truck and they're getting him to the hospital. Buck is telling Eddie to just stay with him and to hold on. Eddie says, are you hurt? Are you hurt? Because Buck has Eddie's blood all over his shirt. So he says that. Well, he is like bleeding out, mind you. So Buck has to tell Christopher what happened because he's like the closest to him besides Eddie. So he has to tell Christopher what happens and he just like breaks down. But then it turns out that he gets like a message that's like he's after surgery, he's gonna be okay. And yeah, he just breaks down in front of Christopher. So once Eddie like it wakes up and everything, he goes to see him. Eddie's about to get discharged from the hospital and he's talking to Buck and he tells Buck that he made Buck Christopher's legal guardian if Eddie were to actually die. If Eddie dies, Buck is Christopher's legal guardian. And he says he did this after the well collapsed because he was like, you know, this job is crazy. You never know. So he went and changed his will after that, which was like a year before. And so Buck asked him, like, you said you did this a year ago. Why are you telling me now? And he says, because Evan. Because Evan, my favorite like quote ever. You came in here the other day saying it would have been you. It would have been better if it was you who was shot, because that's what Buck said. He was like, oh, it should have been me. It would have been easier because then no one has to, like, I have no one. That's basically what Buck had said. And so Eddie is telling him this now because Buck thinks that like no one else needs him, and they do, and he wants to show Buck that they do need him. Yeah. So then they have a welcome home party for Eddie, and then that is how season 4 ends. So season 5, well, Eddie has been dating this woman named Ana Flores, who is Christopher's like teacher, but he's been dating her for a little bit, and he is having so much anxiety now coming back from after getting shot. He is meeting Anna's family and he's just having so much anxiety because he's like, we're like a ready-made family, like with Christopher, and they're shopping for a tuxedo, and the salesperson like mistakes Anna for Eddie's wife, and he like has a panic attack. Buck gets so concerned about Eddie having this panic attack because they go to the hospital, and like the hospital worker like sees Eddie and is like, oh hey, how are you doing? And Buck is like, we were at the hospital, like, so he's very concerned for Eddie. So there is this blackout throughout the city. Christopher and Anna come to the fire station, and Eddie's being so weird. He introduces them to Ravi, but he actually doesn't even introduce Anna. Well, Ravi's like, oh, this must be your wife. He's like, no. So again, he's just being so weird. He's talking to Buck, and Buck is like, Eddie's like, you know, I don't know, my kid loves her, all this stuff. And Buck is like, is that enough? Is that enough for just your kid and lover? Like, you have to be in it too. So after the blackout, they all go home. Anna is with Christopher at Eddie's house, and Eddie breaks up with her. So Eddie's still being kind of weird, and Buck is just like, you know, you don't have to pretend with me. You don't have to pretend with me. Eddie then has a breakdown one night about his former team in the army, and as it turns out, they all died once they got back and everything. Like, now they're dead. And so he has this like huge breakdown, and he's like hitting the wall, and Christopher's freaking out. Well, he locks himself in his room, but Christopher's freaking out. Christopher calls Buck, and Buck goes to their house and helps them out. And so Buck is helping Eddie with Chris through this time. Buck then takes Christopher and Eddie to this like equestrian therapy thing, and as it turns out, the kid who they were helping when Eddie got shot, like, he is there and he's doing so much better. So he's trying to show Eddie that like what he does matters, and he is a firefighter. Because, by the way, Eddie quits being a firefighter because of everything going on. So that's why he kind of has this breakdown of like, he doesn't know who he is and he doesn't know where he belongs. So yeah. Okay, so season six we get to what is called the couch theory. It might have been before this, but as far as I was like rewatching it, I feel like it kind of really sets in during season 6. So the couch theory is about how Buck can never find a couch for his apartment or for his loft that like fits. All of his girlfriends would bring in couches, but then they would break up and then they would leave the couch. They would take the couch. But Buck is very comfortable on Eddie's couch because he's there all the time. So in episode 10 of season 6, Buck gets struck by lightning while they're on a call, and he's up on the ladder and he falls. So he's like just dangling there, and Eddie goes up the ladder and without a harness, without anything, and tries to pull Buck up even though like he can't. It's crazy. So they get him down and they get him to the hospital, and the hospital workers are like, we'll do our best, and Eddie's like, do more. So Buck is in a coma. He actually dies for 3 minutes and 17 seconds, and he's in a coma, and he has this coma dream of his life and of everyone else, and it's just so different. Obviously, Chris goes to visit Buck in the hospital. Like, he desperately wanted to see Buck even though kids weren't allowed, but he like sneaks in. Eddie's crying. It's like this whole thing. In his dream, Buck sees Christopher but not Eddie. In the dream, Christopher is like with his grandparents in Texas, which is like Eddie and Buck's probably biggest nightmare. Then he wakes up from his coma and he's back, and it's glorious and like rejoicify, and it's great. So after the coma, everyone is like treating Buck so weird and different, except for Eddie, of course. So Buck goes over to Eddie's house, and again, couch theory, he falls asleep on Eddie's couch because he feels the most comfortable there. After that, Buck has like this heightened like math skills, so Eddie basically takes Buck out on a date to like it's kind of a date, but it's not. They go to like this like underground poker thing. Yeah, there's that. So Eddie's Tia Peppa is basically trying to set him up on dates, and Eddie is like, I hate going on dates because it feels like I have to perform. What do you mean by that? And on Buck's side, Buck meets this girl, she's a death doula. They meet on a call. So Buck and Natalia start seeing each other. Buck tells Eddie that he feels like Natalia really sees her, and Eddie's like, does she? Like, he's really questioning that, but he doesn't really say it. But Eddie tells Buck, like, you don't have to be what anyone else thinks. You just have to be, anyone for anyone else. So that's how season 6 ends. Season 7 comes in. Buck tells Eddie that him and Talia broke up, and Eddie is not surprised at all. So during season 7, they meet this guy named Tommy. Tommy used to work at the 118, but now he works with the air rescue. So he helped them with opening emergency in season 7 with the cruise ship, all this stuff. So they meet Tommy. Eddie and Tommy start hanging out, and Buck is like really jealous of that. He goes to see the air station, and Eddie shows up and is like, oh, are you jumping ship? And Buck says, no, just keeping my options fluid. So Buck and Tommy go to Las Vegas on like the chopper, and Buck is just like so jealous of that. And then after, like, the next day, he's like, how was it? And he's like, oh, it was great. Like, you know when you meet someone and you just click. And Buck is like, yeah, I do. So Buck is at the station gym, and he's really trying to get Eddie's attention, and it doesn't work. So Buck decides to go to this basketball game that like some of the first responders play. He takes Chimney with him, and Chimney's like, oh, I'm a basketball beard, that's why I'm here. And he ends up hurting Eddie because he was so jealous. So after that, Tommy ends up going to Buck's house. I will never understand why it was Tommy and not Eddie, but whatever. Tommy goes to Buck's house, and they're talking, and Buck is like, trying to get your attention has been so exhausting, really exhausting. And Tommy's like, my attention? Because we all know it was actually Eddie's. And Buck is like, yeah, I guess so. Like, he's not even sure himself. And then they kiss. And this is when this whole thing happened. Yeah, so they kiss. Buck is canonically queer at this point, which is beautiful. So the next episode, Buck and Tommy are on like their first date. Eddie and Marisol show up at the restaurant, and Buck is so gagged. Buck is like, and Buck doesn't really want Eddie to know that he's on a date with Tommy, so he doesn't even lie. He just starts talking about women, and he's like, oh. And so Tommy ends up leaving Buck at the curb because he doesn't think he's ready. So then the next day, Buck comes out to Maddie. He's talking to her about it, and he comes out and tells her that like he went on a date with this guy, but he lied to Eddie. More importantly, he lied to Eddie, and he's mad about himself. Mad about that than the date going wrong. Yeah. So then Maddie tells him, if there's something that you need to tell Eddie, you will in your own time. Yeah, very cute, very older sister. So Eddie is having like a problem with Marisol. This whole thing, he's talking to Buck about it. Buck, then they're talking, and Buck comes out to Eddie and tells him that him and Tommy were actually on a date when they saw them there. It's probably one of my favorite like coming out scenes. I feel you know, Eddie is just so like I guess gentle with Buck, and he's like, this doesn't change a thing between us, but it should. And at the end of it, you know, they hug, and Eddie's telling Buck that he should call Tommy, and if Tommy doesn't see it, then that's his problem. But I think it was just such a cute scene, regardless of Tommy, just, you know, Buck telling Eddie that he went on a date with a man, and it was just fine. Yeah. So then Chimney and Maddie are getting married, and Buck wants to throw Chimney a bachelor party. Chimney doesn't want it, but yeah. So it's like a costume, it's like an 80s themed or something. So then Eddie suggests dressing up as Crocodile Tubbs, so they do that. So they go to the bachelor party, crazy stuff happens, they get drunk. It's really funny. There is like a deleted scene of them singing What I Like About You during karaoke, which I literally need that scene like I need air to breathe. I would love to see that scene be released someday, but who knows, maybe it will. Tommy goes to the bachelor party, but he is not dressed because he's like on standby for work, but yet Buck and Eddie are dressed in their matching costumes. Like, okay, sure. So it's this whole thing with Chimney, it's just like a whole other thing. But then as it comes out, like they find Chimney and they go to the wedding. Eddie's family is literally at the wedding, Christopher and Abuela, I think. I don't know about Tia Papa, but Eddie's family is at their wedding because that's family. Like, okay, so in season 7, Eddie meets this woman named Kim who looks exactly like his ex-wife, his dead ex-wife, Shannon. It is the same actress, and like that was the point. But he meets this woman. There's no relation. Like, it's just this woman that happens to look like his dead wife. So he kind of starts seeing this woman named Kim, by the way, behind Marisol's back, behind Buck's back at this point. She ends up going to the fire station when Buck is there, and she's like, oh, I'm looking for Eddie. He's like, what? And he says my name. No. But she brings them like brownies, and she's like, can you give this to Eddie? I don't know. But point is that Buck meets her. He goes to see Eddie, and he's like, who the fuck is this? Who is Kim? Me. No. And he kind of confronts Eddie, like, what are you doing? And so Eddie's telling him, like, I don't know, I just saw her, she looks like Shannon, and la-di-da. So then, because of that, Eddie ends up talking to Kim, and is like, comes clean, and is like, you look like my ex-wife, all this stuff. So he comes clean, but then Kim comes back dressed even more like Shannon. Like, she does her hair and her clothes to look more like Shannon. She's like, I'm gonna give you the closure that you need, and he's like, no, please leave. But she doesn't let up. So she comes in, he's like talking to her like she's Shannon, and then lo and behold, Marisol and Christopher walk in. Yeah, and Christopher thinks that that's his mom. It's so crazy, it's so insane. Eddie calls Buck for help with Christopher because Christopher like won't talk to Eddie, rightfully so, because of that. So Buck is there trying to help, but as it turns out, Christopher called his grandparents, Eddie's parents, to come get him, and he is going back to Texas to live with them because he doesn't want to live with Eddie anymore. So yeah, Buck is just comforting him during that time, and then Christopher leaves. So that's where we're at for season 7. Buck is out as a queer man. He's dating Tommy, unfortunately. Eddie obviously breaks up with Marisol. Like, they break up. Christopher is going back to Texas. Now, season 8, let's get into it. Christopher is still in Texas, but he has like this birthday party over Zoom for Eddie. So Eddie invites Buck and Tommy to go, and they're there and they're doing that. So in the Halloween episode of season 8, Buck thinks that he's cursed because he found this like old corpse that he thought was a prop, but it was real, and so he keeps getting like hurt. He dislocates his shoulder and he's in the hospital, but guess who's in the hospital with him? Oh, it's Eddie. Eddie's with him, and then Tommy shows up. Right. So then Buck gets boils on his face and he calls Eddie. He does not call 911, his sister. He doesn't call his brother-in-law, Jim. No, he calls Eddie. Eddie takes a look and he's like, you're gonna be fine. And Buck is like, okay, if you say so. So that's the Halloween episode. And the next episode, episode 6, called Confessions, which was my favorite episode of season 8. Eddie goes to the confession booth thing at the church, and he's saying that he lied. He lied to his son, his best friend, Buck, and his girlfriend. In that order. That is the order of importance for Eddie. So in this episode, Buck and Tommy also break up because, as we learn, Abby and Tommy were actually engaged. They were engaged, and Buck is reeling with that, and he is like spiraling a little bit, and he's going crazy, but he comes to terms with it for the most part. But he asked Tommy to move in, and Tommy's like, no, I know what's gonna happen. You're gonna break my heart, and I'm your first boyfriend, I guess, not your last, whatever. They break up. Buck goes to Eddie's house, and they sit in silence and drink beer on what? The couch. Yeah. So in the next episode, Buck is still dealing with his breakup. Eddie is trying to stop Buck from calling Tommy. Buck is talking to Maddie and Chimney about it, and he's like, I don't know which pond to jump back into. You don't have to choose, Buck. You're bi. And Maddie tells him, I think you need to trust that the universe is going to bring you a special person. The universe already has. They just need to realize it. So in the next episode, episode 8, Eddie decides to move to Texas to be with Christopher. And he tells Buck this. Well, unexpectedly, Buck comes over and he comes clean about it. And Buck is like so distraught over this. He looks so sad, but he's like, I'm going to help you look for houses because I don't trust you. But he looks so sad, and you can tell that he's so sad to be left again. Buck is still distraught about Eddie leaving, but he's still trying to help Eddie. Eddie needs to sublet his house, so Buck helps him with that. At least he tries. He kind of ends up sabotaging some of the showings, but he tries. So Buck ends up adopting this dog that they had rescued from a call, and Eddie's like weirdly jealous of the dog because of the way that Buck is like talking about it. Buck accidentally like tells everyone that Eddie is moving. Buck comes over that night and is kind of like apologizing to Eddie about accidentally messing up the showing, and he's just saying that he is having more trouble dealing with Eddie moving than he thought. And then Eddie says, if you're asking me to choose between you or my son, you're gonna lose every time, which like, yeah, of course, absolutely, and even Buck knows that. But then Buck tells Eddie that he is the renter. He's gonna rent Eddie's house while he goes to Texas to be with to be with Christopher. And Eddie's like, you really did that for me? And Buck is like, you and Christopher. What? Everything is about Buddy except for Buddy, which is what about Christopher? Yeah. So yes, Buck is gonna take over Eddie's house while he is in Texas and being with Christopher. So in the next episode, Maddie gets kidnapped, and so they are looking for her. Eddie is with Buck helping look for her, and Buck is again spiraling. He's saying everything was going so well, Bobby was back, and then Tommy broke up with him, and now his sister's missing, and like it's this whole thing. Oh, and you're moving to Texas, like it's nothing. And Eddie's like, it's not nothing, meaning more so like it's such a hard decision to choose between staying in LA, which he has, you know, kind of made a home at, and going back to Texas to be with Christopher, which is his son, which is his, you know, everything. And he's like, it's not nothing. It's not a easy decision. It was a hard decision. Maddie ends up getting found. And then you have Homotron 3000 at the end of that episode with Eddie leaving to Texas and Buddy's goodbye scene. Why is it that Buck and Eddie get their own special separate goodbye scene than the others? I don't know. But yeah, they're saying goodbye to each other. Eddie is letting Buck know that like he does matter to him and that he's gonna miss him. And yeah, and then Buck is just standing there in the rain like a lonely puppy, like the one he rescued. In the next episode, Buck is not coping well with Eddie being in Texas. Ravi kind of comes in once Eddie leaves, and he kind of takes Eddie's position in the 118, and so he's partnered with Buck. They go to a bar, and Buck is just talking about Eddie nonstop. And Ravi's like so sick of it. Ravi goes to the bar, and he sees Tommy, so he brings Tommy over to the table. As it turns out, Eddie stopped talking to Tommy when Buck and Tommy broke up, which is delicious. So Buck and Tommy hook up at Eddie's house, mind you. And I think, you know, Buck was just doing that to fill the void because, mind you, Buck is not like unpacked. He has not really slept at Eddie's house while he was gone. He keeps going to Maddie's house. And he just hooks up with his ex to fill the void because he misses Eddie. That's just the truth. Buck is like, yeah, I know that was just like one thing, like what's not, whatever. And Tommy's like, oh, and then Buck is like, you want to try again? And Tommy says, yeah, maybe, now that the competition's out of the way. Tommy saw Eddie as competition in their relationship, which everyone could tell, but like now it is out there in the world. And Buck is like so in denial. He's like, no, he's a renter, he's straight. which Tommy scoffs at. But yeah, Buck is just like, what are you talking about? And then Buck says, I don't have to want to sleep with everyone I have feelings for, and I don't have to have feelings for everyone that I sleep with. That is scripture. That is scripture to me. Shakespeare could never. But yeah, basically, like, even if he does have feelings for Eddie, he doesn't have to act on them because Eddie's straight, right? Wrong, but whatever. So then Buck is talking to Maddie about it, and she's like, everyone wants me to be in love with Eddie. And she's like, are you? And he's like, in love with Eddie? Like, those words come out of his mouth. Crazy. Which she says, it wouldn't be so crazy. Right. So then Maddie tells him, like, you need to learn the lesson again to be alone. But he's been alone for how many effing seasons? He has been learning this lesson over and over again. He just belongs with Eddie. Like, So then he finally settles in Eddie's house and is unpacking his stuff and is decorating the house, and he's kind of just coming to terms with that and dealing with that. Then the next episode just shows Eddie in Texas. Buck and Eddie are FaceTiming like a lot while Eddie's in Texas, and Buck is trying to give Eddie advice about how to handle the situation with Christopher and his parents. And Eddie's really struggling to find a job, and he's trying to get in with the fire station in El Paso, but they don't have any like openings or something. So he starts doing Uber, and Eddie's like, I did not come here to do Uber. And Buck is like, you didn't go there to be a firefighter either. You went there to be Christopher's dad, which is so true. Then we jump to Bobby Nash's funeral. I know, such a big jump, like where did it go wrong? But anyway, as it pertains to Buddy, Buck picks Eddie up from the airport. And then after the funeral, or like the next day or something, the next episode, Eddie is talking to Hen and Karen about Buck and about his grief and how they're both dealing with it. Karen says, you're worried about Buck's level of worry. Like, they are worried about each other. So then Buck and Eddie have a fight in the kitchen. And they're really just not mad at each other, but they're kind of just mad that like they weren't there for each other, which is again very similar to their fight before in season 3. I think they're just mad that they weren't there for each other like they could have been. So Eddie goes to the airport. Buck thinks that he goes back to Texas, but he goes to the airport to pick up Christopher because he flew Christopher in to try to cheer up Buck. Once again, everything. And he also brings Tia Peppa to their house, and she's there with them, and it's very similar to 204 Stuck, which I talked about, which is, you know, the family, and I don't know, there's just a lot of parallels there. Tia Peppa even has a nickname for Buck, which is Emancito, and they're talking about Eddie and Christopher, and Tia Peppa says, our Eddie. So then in the season 8 finale, they throw Eddie a basically going away barbecue, even though he's already left. They throw him a little barbecue at the station, and they give him his turnouts. Buck is going to Buck puts in a transfer out of the 118 because he says that's just a number now because Bobby's gone, Eddie's gone, like everything is just mixed up again, and so he wants to transfer out. So in this finale, and that emergency is a building collapse, and they have to go deal with it. Buck and Ravi are with a civilian, and Eddie's like talking to them, even though they're like, what are you doing here? Like, because he's not a firefighter there anymore, but he shows up anyway to help. And then Buck is like, where are you? And Eddie's like, right in front of you. Well, yes. So they finish out the call. Eddie and Christopher decide to move back to LA, and subsequently Buck is now looking for a new house. I don't think he gets kicked out. I don't think Eddie would do that, but he is looking. He is starting to look for a new house, and the like realtor that he's working with is like, why did you move out of your old place? And he says, it was never really mine. Okay, August. Swifty. So that is where we're at. Eddie and Christopher back in LA. Buck looking for someone or something to call his own. Okay, so like, where do we go from here? What do I want from Buddy Cannon? Well, first of all, Eddie has to get out of the closet. Not just for Buddy Cannon, but for like his own sake, for his own character like arc. Eddie needs to come out. Eddie needs to realize he's gay. Eddie needs to realize why so many of his relationships with women just didn't work out, and why he feels so pressured to go on dates with women is because he's gay. Thank you. Then both of them need to realize that they have feelings for each other, and that they are in love with each other. Both come to terms with that, probably in their own way. I think they're both gonna have different ways of dealing with that, but I just want them both to realize that in their own way, and then be together forever. I want to see Christopher's reaction to them, because I think he would be kind of like almost hesitant, not because he's homophobic, but because, you know, his mom left him. Like, all of these people leave him, similar to Buck. The people in Buck's life, people leave him, and I think he would just be nervous that Buck would leave him. And I just would want like Buck to reassure Christopher that even if things don't work out with Eddie, he's gonna be there for Christopher no matter what. I don't know, I just want something like that. Buckley Diaz family. You know, I really question why not? Why aren't these two together already? Why? I think if either one of them was a woman, they would be canon by now. They would. They absolutely would. Let's not pretend like they wouldn't, because they would, probably. I think the other characters kind of see it. You know, we see Maddie, especially throughout, being very observant. Hen, Karen, Chimney. I think everyone could see it. And R.I.P. Bobby. Bobby also saw it. Part of the reason I think, I don't know, the writers might, or the showrunner might not have done it so far is because of like stereotypes, because this keeps coming up of like, oh, well, you know, Buck is queer, like canonically queer right now. Oh, it's like the stereotype of him being in love with his straight best friend, which they just talked about in season 8. And it's like, it's just not that, because to me, Eddie isn't straight. So there's that. Then with that, it's like 2 queer guys who are friends, like, oh, they can't just be friends, they have to date. It's not that either. It's Buddy. It is just Buddy, and that is like it. That's all it is. And I think Buddy is just so beyond any of this like stereotypes or anything that it just makes the most sense. And another thing, people say, oh, it would just be fan service. Okay, and I am the fan and I want to be serviced. No, but I don't even think it would be fan service necessarily entirely. I think it just makes the most sense. There's no reason not to make them canon. The show has always had queer stories and queer characters and queer ships from the very beginning. You have Hen and Karen, who are a beautiful Black lesbian couple. You have Josh, who works at the dispatch with Maddie. He is gay. Athena's ex-husband, he came out as gay in the first episode of the show. Like, there's no reason for them not to do it. I just think there's a reason why Buck and Eddie are the 2 main characters who don't have like an established love interest, an established relationship, because they belong together. I'm so serious. As we saw with their other relationships, there's a reason why they never worked out. It's because the other person is always going to be in the way. The other person is always going to be the third person in their relationships. All I can say is that I just hope that the writers kind of realize this and do it well. Of course, I want it to be done well. I don't want it to just be thrown together and like, oh, they're together. No, of course I want it to be done well and for it to make sense, like, of course. But it does make sense, and I think there is a way to do it, and if the writers can just lock in and understand that, I think they can create a beautiful story. If Buddy isn't real, then we created the most beautiful love story ever. No, I mean, my hope for season 9 and the rest of the show is that Buddy end up together forever and ever. I do not want them to break up once they do get together. I hope the actors like will agree with it and agree that this is where the story should go. And yeah, so that was my thoughts about Buddy. There's so much more I could say, probably. I just wanted to try to hit the big marks and the most recent like Buddy shenanigans that they have going on currently. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed me yapping about these gay firefighters. Buddy Canon season 9, Buddy Canon 2025, I hope. Thank you so much for watching this crazy video, and I will see you in the next one.